There's a nice hidden lake a short walk away from my house in Parsonfield, Maine. I've been going fishing there for as long as I've lived here. It's hidden away from any roads or houses. It has perfect privacy, and I would always be the only one out on the lake fishing. In fact, I would leave my kayak in the same spot by the lake whenever I wasn't using it. It was easier than lugging the thing back and forth from my house to the lake anytime I wanted to use it. I would leave it leaning up against this huge tree every time. The kayak is heavy enough to not fall over from a windstorm or anything. I also leave it covered to prevent critters from taking refuge inside. It was a warm summer's evening. I was out on the lake already for about an hour, and I'd caught a few trout already, which I'd thrown into the cooler. It was dusk at this point. The little bit of light left in the sky was disappearing behind the trees. I was gonna bring it in soon, and just then, I heard sounds from the edge of the lake. I turned and saw someone standing at the edge of the water, tipping a barrel of some kind over, pouring its contents into the lake. It looked to me like they were polluting the lake with something. I took it upon myself to yell out, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" The person looked up at me, and he then ran into the woods, with the contents of the barrel still pouring into the water. I looked more closely at the liquid being poured out into the lake, and it looked like a dark red liquid. Though it was dark out, so I can't say with 100% certainty if it was red, but it was very dark. I felt a sense of unease creep up throughout my body. I decided I wanted to leave. I'm a big nature guy though, and seeing people littering or polluting the environment makes me sick. I genuinely couldn't resist shouting something out to that person, but I didn't feel comfortable here any longer. I planned on reporting this to the Department of Environmental Protection. I paddled the kayak back to my usual spot. I took all of my gear off the kayak before pulling it out of the water. As I was putting the cover over the kayak, I heard one single snap of something not far away, like the crunch of something under a person's shoe. I turned and was about to say who's there, but I decided against it. I finished covering the kayak quicker than I ever had before. I didn't even bother standing it up to lean on the tree this time. I left it on the ground. I picked up my gear and cooler and started quickly walking out of the woods and onto the road, which led to my house. It was only a couple minutes of a walk and I was back home. I kept looking over my shoulder the entire time though, thinking someone was behind me. I put my gear in the shed real quick, then went inside. I never locked the door so quickly. I was genuinely spooked. I rinsed off the trout and put them in the fridge, planning on cooking them tomorrow. Tonight, I just heated up some leftovers. As the food was in the microwave, there was a knock at my front door. The fear and dread that I was feeling the entire walk back to the house returned in an instant, and my suspicion that I was being followed home was basically confirmed. I mean, who else would be knocking on my door this late? My lights were on, my car was in the driveway, whoever it was knew I was in here. I had all the shades closed though, so nobody could look inside. They knocked on the door again. The microwave beeped as the timer hit 0. I'm sure whoever was outside heard it. All the windows were cracked open, and a moment later, there was a knock now on the window, and a man's voice said through the window, "Excuse me, I think you saw me at the lake earlier. I'd just like to explain myself." There was absolutely no chance I was opening the door to this person. For them to stalk me to my house told me this was a dangerous person. They repeatedly knocked on the window and kept yelling hello through it. I decided to acknowledge him now that he was getting more aggressive. I yelled, "Yo, leave or I'll call the police." I intended to either way, but it was still a threat to get him to leave. The man responded calmly now, saying, "Sir, if you could just open the front door, I'll explain everything to you." I repeated my threat, and I didn't hear his voice again. At this point, I shut and locked every window in the house and turned on the AC. I also made a report to the non-emergency police number, detailing both the barrel being dumped into the lake and the man coming to my house. I also made an online report with the Department of Environmental Protection. Making these 2 reports honestly made me feel a little better about going to sleep that night. But thank God I'm a light sleeper. In the middle of the night, like 2 a.m., I heard a crash from downstairs. I immediately sprang out of my bed and grabbed my Glock from the closet. I heard someone's attempt at quiet footsteps coming up the creaky wooden steps. I had my Glock loaded in hand as I stood behind my dresser right by my closet, aiming at the door. I heard very slow creeping towards my door. My bedroom door is closest to the stairs, so it was naturally the first door that they would approach. And sure enough, I heard the doorknob slowly press down, and then the door pushed open. I saw nothing but the man's silhouette enter the room. I flicked on the lamp next to me so he could see my gun, and I screamed, "Get on the ground now." He raised his hands in the air and seemed for a second to be motioning for me to calm down. He had a small blade in his hand. I told him to drop it, but then he said calmly, "I'm leaving," and he turned and ran for downstairs. I yelled at him to stop, but he clearly took the chance on me being too afraid to pull the trigger. I heard him leave through the front door. I ran downstairs to lock the front door right away and then call 911. My living room window was shattered. Glass was all over the floor. I kept my sight on that broken window until the police officers showed up. I had to explain that I already made a non-emergency report of what happened earlier. In fear of waiting too long by morning for the barrel to be gone, in the darkness, I went with 2 of the officers who showed up to my house to where I saw that man dumping the barrel into the lake. But after 20 minutes of walking around looking for it, it was gone. The man must have made sure not to leave it behind. I gave my best description of the man to the police for their report. The man was a short, bearded white man with a receding hairline and glasses, wearing a black flannel shirt and black pants. After the police left, I stayed in the living room all night with my gun next to me, watching TV. No way in hell was I going to sleep with a broken window and some nut job out there. At dawn, my brothers came over to help me fix the window. My brother Dale stayed at the house while my other brother and I went to Home Depot to get the window and parts. Dale stayed at the house with me for a few nights till things cooled down. My not-so-wild theory is that the barrel contained human remains, possibly dissolved in some kind of acid. Why else would that man follow me home and then break into my house to potentially murder me? Trust your gut if something feels wrong. I knew if I opened my door to that man, something terrible might have happened to me.